Good evening, Professor and classmates. Today I will be doing my presentation on the tenets and detriments of generalized anxiety and alcoholic disorder. So, to start off with a brief description of my client, alcohol use and generalized anxiety disorder. So, the presenting problem is the respective individual patient is diagnosed with both substance abuse and generalized anxiety disorder in his respective life. The client history. As the client became older, the issues dealing with his anxiety disorder has become more complicating in nature, while also leading to his strong reliance on using substance to cure said issues. The biopsychosocial spiritual indicators. From these indicators, the patient is trying to amass a more refined understanding on how to better himself and those focuses over an extended period. The developmental. These issues are developed throughout the last several years and how that has become only one more complicating. And the family history of my client. The patient has no strong and significant family history of anxiety disorder. The next slide that I will be talking about is titled Inpatient Treatment and Diagnosis, which is basically the reasonings. The client has entered inpatient treatment in order to undergo MAT orienting mechanisms. In this case, medication-assisted treatment, also known as MAT, is the use of medications with also counseling therapies which can be effective in treating opioid use disorders and ensuring recovery in time, as stated by McKay in 2010. From the case scenario, the diagnostic impression is that the individual suffers from alcoholic substance abuse, which he believes is the only mechanism for him to see himself in a much better focus. This is stated by McCarthy et al. In 2015. For the diagnosis, this requires noting directly the physical and psychological issues pertaining to alcoholic substance abuse and its own issues, sort of speak. The next slide that I will be talking about is titled Supporting Topic Choice for the Active Treatment Stage. The first thing that I will be mentioning is when noting the importance behind active treatment, there are a multitude of steps that will need to be taken and therefore implemented. So the first step that's going to be needed to be taken and therefore implemented is it involves ensuring that the individual patient understands he is truly facing both an issue with alcohol abuse and second, with generalized anxiety disorder about his personal life. This was stated by Yule and Kelly in 2019. The second stage is another step that can be taken would be to note the multiple treatments that can be taken in which the patient has already begun through pursuing more inpatient purposes. This was stated by Sachs, Chandler, and Gonzalez in 2008. And the final step is the patient would be able to use medication treatment and more behavioral and communicatory therapy that can help the patient with his problems. And this was stated by McHugh in 2016. The next slide I'll be talking about is titled Group Format Outline to Group Members, dealing with expression and discussion. First off, I would like to introduce myself to my fellow classmates and my professor. My name is Gabriel Mandel. I am here to outline the focus of correlating one's own alcoholic disorder to the co-occurrence of a generalized anxiety disorder. This topic is super important to recovery and comorbidity because it fixates on understanding how alcohol use and anxiety go hand in hand with each other, which then can use certain treatments and mechanisms to avoid any comorbidity issues and surely coming to play. By being able to understand each of these focuses can help assist in noting and then completing more research on the subject at hand. With the help of the group itself, This is important to figure out and then work on, which can show this relationship of alcohol use and occurred anxiety. The next slide I'll be talking about is called Importance of the Topic, focusing mainly on the discussion to the group members. This topic is appropriate and important because there are many individuals in the United States who are respectively dealing with alcohol usage and second anxiety disorder. From being able to then correlate those who are suffering from both, this only leads to explain how each can be meditated by pursuing one treatment mechanism over the other. Within a group setting of recovering addicted individuals, this topic can undergo certain behavioral treatments of how people can communicate with others by being able to establish how they properly meditate their own difficult issues. From the found outcomes and research, there is important need for MAT treatment because this helps in a behavioral setting, but also through using medication in order to effectively thwart any complications in coming to be. The next slide that I will be presenting, again with my topic being the tenets and detriments of generalized anxiety and alcoholic disorder. Once again, I'll introduce myself and I'll give a little bit about who I am. Hello everyone, my name is Gabriel Mendel. I am currently majoring in mental health counseling, addictions, and recovery. This is my last semester in Liberty University. Man, I am excited to graduate finally on May 15th of 2021. My experience in Liberty University has taught me a lot, especially majoring as a mental health counseling. The reason why I chose this major was because I wanted to help individuals who in the world or in society have an addiction to alcohol, and then basically when they go through therapy or rehab or any kind of form of treatment, some individuals come out being successful, meaning they withdraw from their alcohol abuse, they withdraw from substance abuse, and then there's other individuals in this world or society, as we say, that still to this day cannot let go of that alcohol or that drug or any form of substance that they use on a daily basis. So I feel that every class that I've taken in Liberty University, every aspect, every component, every medication, possibly everything that I learned, I feel like when I go into the career path of being a mental health counselor, therapist, working in a clinic, working in a school, anything, that I'll be able to assist individuals that are going through an alcoholic addiction. Like I said before in the presentation when I started, my topic that I chose to present to the class is the topic of generalized anxiety and alcoholic disorders. There was a 2012 survey conducted by the SAMHSA, which showed that about 2/3 of people over the age of 12 surveyed reported drinking alcohol in the prior 12 months, and this article was addressed by Watkins in 2021. So to elaborate more about this survey that was conducted, basically, as we see that children by the age of 12 and over are already consuming alcoholic beverages, while the state of law is that you're able to consume an alcoholic beverage at the age of 21. Now that we are seeing that now that we are seeing children ages of 12 and above consume alcohol, this shows us that they're starting at an early age and progressing up and up. And when you're 12 to 13, you don't understand that what it means to withdraw from alcohol, or what it means that if you continue to consume alcohol, what it can do to you in your future, or what it does to you in the moment. You don't realize that because you're 12 and 13. At that stage, majority of the males are going through puberty. Girls are also going through puberty. So you basically start to identify who you are in society. And you want to fit into a crowd and go to parties and stuff like that. So alcohol comes into play because now 12 to 13-year-olds are seeing individuals in their 20s consume alcohol, drink at bars, go to parties, and now that 12 and 13-year-old wants to do the same thing. There was another statistic proven by the NIAAA that in 2012, 6.2 of the adult population in the country had some kind of alcohol use disorder, also by Watkins. Like I said before, the 6.2% of the adult population in the country, that might not seem a lot to many people or society, but individualized, it still means something, because if 6% of the adult population in the country are consuming alcohol to the point where they have a use disorder of alcohol, then that progresses into years and years. And then if not seek the proper treatment immediately, it's going to be a hard time getting it done later. Also, individuals diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder may depend on drugs and alcohol to self-medicate their symptoms, which can lead to an addiction. So we all know that people on a daily basis deal with an anxiety disorder, whether it be a past traumatic event that happened in your childhood, something that happened a couple of years ago, could be something that's happening now. So majority of the people, when they deal with anxiety disorder, especially if they also have a substance abuse or an alcohol addiction, they'll tend to use a specific drug or alcohol to be able to cope with that anxiety disorder. My next slide, which is basically the process activity. So the way I would figure out whether a person that has both generalized anxiety disorder and an alcoholic disorder, I would basically create a survey with 10 questions with a scale of 1 to 5, where 1 being not at all and 5 being all the time. So the point of this survey would basically be to demonstrate it to the clients. Distribute to the clients. They would be able to take the survey by answering the questions truthfully. And they would be able to see whether they can deal with their generalized anxiety disorder through different mechanisms, or it's only through alcohol. Like I said before, the purpose of this would let the people answer questions truthfully about their alcoholic addiction and determine whether alcohol leads to generalized anxiety if they do not consume an alcoholic beverage. The participants would only be allowed 1 attempt for the survey. The purpose of 1 attempt is because if they answer it the first time by taking it 1 time, they won't be able to change the answers. Normally, particularly people that tend to take surveys online will take it multiple times, where they would change their answers every attempt that they take. The point of this survey will be mainly to focus and collect data on how many individuals who suffer from generalized anxiety disorder depend on consuming alcoholic beverages and the quantity they intake on average to cope with their anxiety. So basically from that point, we can see that, or we can assume that if we demonstrate a 10 survey question to any individual or any client that we have that deals with both anxiety disorder and alcoholic disorder, we can test them, or we can figure out through the survey after they're completed, when they're experiencing that generalized anxiety disorder, how much of alcohol are they typically consuming to de-stress themselves from that anxiety disorder, which is very important. Because, for example, you can have a client come to you with generalized anxiety disorder and say, hey, listen, I drink 1 beer daily just to be able to relax myself and forget about the anxiety that I'm coping with. While other clients might come to you and say, I have a serious alcoholic addiction where I'm intaking 6 to 7 12-ounce cans of beer daily just to get over that anxiety. So, I mean, a lot of people will continue to drink alcohol to an extent where their anxiety disorder is becoming less and less. But at the end of the point, they're not realizing that the more alcohol they consume, the more of their addiction rises. So what we particularly want to do is to decrease that alcoholic addiction instead of increasing it. So basically, to give you guys a little bit more continuation about the survey, just for some of you, if you guys didn't get me the first time. So for example, I found a survey that was administered by the American Journal of Psychiatry because the members over there got a chance to answer the questions truthfully and determine whether they depend on alcohol to cope with their anxiety disorder. The survey was really pretty straightforward. It consisted of 10 multiple choice questions. The name of the actual survey was the Alcohol Use Disorders Identification Test. So basically, on my next slide, I'll give you guys like a little bit of background about what questions they asked. But particularly, I found this survey to be actually very helpful because not only did it focus on if the individual drinks alcohol to cope with the anxiety disorder, but it also had questions pertaining to how much does that individual intake on a daily basis to deal with the generalized anxiety disorder. So like I said, in my next slide, I'll give you guys like a couple of questions that you guys can think about to see and familiarize yourself with how the survey worked. For now, I could just give you one question. I can tell you like a little bit about it, and then on my next slide, I'll continue more. So one of the questions that was actually surveyed was, how often during the last year have you failed to do what was normally expected from you because of drinking? So a little bit more about this point. A lot of individuals who consume an alcoholic beverage daily or get to that stage where they have where they experience, actually, sorry about that, an alcoholic disorder. Majority of the times when people drink alcohol, they forget what's normally expected from them. So that could be meaning personal issues or events that arise, or basically if they created a schedule for themselves the day before what they're supposed to do. And 9 out of 10 times, a lot of clients who consume a lot of alcohol will wake up the next day, they'll say they're tired or they have no energy, so they can't get the tasks done that they had previously the night before, set up for themselves for the next day. So the survey is pretty good. I could say that if administered to a bunch of clients, that it will basically show whether they rely more on alcohol to deal with their stress or whether they're willing to give up that abuse, which is alcohol, and cope with anxiety disorder in a different way. So like I said, I was going to give you guys examples of the survey, which was done by Brady, Tolliver, and Verdun in 2007. I already gave you guys one question. So another question that I would like to ask, you guys could feel free to just think about it, see how the test is administered, or the survey actually, to give yourself guys like a little gist of it. So there was another question that I found on the survey was, how often during the last year have you been unable to remember what happened the night before because you had been drinking? And there's a scale over there with choices being 0 to 4. So 0 would be never, and 4 they had as daily or almost daily. The reason why I wanted to give you guys this particular question, which is pertaining basically to my presentation, and I'm sure it's pertaining to your presentations as well. Memory. majority of the times when participants, I should say, not even participants, when clients come to seek treatment, to seek help, they have a lot of issues with memory when it comes to bringing that concept with alcohol. So a lot of people will say, oh, I drank so much alcohol that I don't remember anything. I don't remember how I got home. I don't remember where I was, who I was with, what I was doing, what happened. Did I lose my phone? Did I lose my keys? Stuff like that, and etc. So in that concept, we can see that if people answer truthfully, that how do I say it? Basically, the more alcohol you consume and the more alcohol you put into your system, the more you're not going to remember events leading from the previous night. So what you might do is the next day you might ask somebody who was with you, or try to find out who was with you, what happened that night. Now I would like to speak about the objectives, the goals, and the desired outcomes for the activity, which was the survey. So for the objective, there's a lot of objectives that can be incorporated into the activity, which is the survey. But the main objective that I felt would be necessary when administering the survey is to figure out how many individuals rely on consuming alcohol to cope with their generalized anxiety disorder. We want to be able to see basically how many individuals consume alcohol on a daily basis when experiencing a generalized anxiety disorder. The goal basically of this activity, for many of you who might figure out or try to think about what the goal could be, the main goal where I see it coming from is to help individuals after participating in the survey to decrease their consumption and alcohol and cope with generalized anxiety disorder through other ways and not by drinking alcohol. So I would say that alcohol doesn't always solve the issue when it comes to anxiety disorders. Alcohol, I think, in my perspective, makes the anxiety disorder worse. Yeah, you're gonna forget about it for maybe a couple hours or just the night or the day, whatever it is. But eventually, that anxiety is gonna come back to you. And then you're gonna automatically assume that if I consume an alcoholic beverage, I'm gonna forget about it again. But why do that periodically over time, day by day? You're just consuming alcohol to think that you're going to get away from the generalized anxiety disorder that you're currently going through instead of coping with other ways. So I would say, in my perspective, how I see it or how I've experienced it with other people, when I see somebody dealing with anxiety disorder, I feel the best way to cope with it is maybe go for a walk, listen to some music, get your mind off of it in a positive way. Not everything that happens in life with anxiety has to be dealt with an alcoholic beverage. It's just gonna mess it up, and that anxiety disorder is never gonna, it's gonna be like this with the alcohol, but it's never gonna separate. You want it to separate. You want the alcohol to get away from your system and the anxiety to decrease, basically to make it small. But if this alcohol and the anxiety are coming together, it's never gonna go away. It's gonna be locked in, and then let's say, for example, 4 or 5 years pass by, and that anxiety comes back to you. You're not gonna be able to let go of this alcohol side because you already have that mindset that if I'm gonna go through this anxiety disorder like I did 4 or 5 years ago, then this one, which is the alcohol, has to come with me. So the desired outcome, basically, to summarize, because I know I've been talking for a while and I know maybe some of my points are not clear. So basically, the desired outcome after completing the survey is that individuals will take their results serious and will find other positive ways to decrease their alcohol consumption. We also want to make sure that we help the individual withdraw from their alcoholic addiction and possibly see a result where the individual has either quit consuming alcohol for good or they're decreasing their limit of alcohol. So, like I said before, if the individual is drinking 5 to 6 12-ounce beers a day, and we're trying to decrease the alcohol consumption, we might say that 5 to 6 is a lot. Let's bring it down to 2. Let's see how, if you consume 2 beers, let's see how how you deal with your anxiety. Or possibly, let's say the anxiety is right here and you want to consume your 5 to 6 beers. Let's come to a conclusion in the middle where we can possibly say that we're willing to give up the alcohol and we'll deal with the anxiety in a different way, basically. Closed group, which is my next presentation. Which is my next slide. I'm sorry about that. Consuming alcohol can play a significant role when people are dealing with generalized anxiety. Majority of the people feel as if alcohol is the solution to every situation in life and will get solved when they consume an alcoholic beverage, like I mentioned previously. The survey that was conducted by the American Journal of Psychiatry will help individuals see what level their addiction is at and will hopefully aim to either decrease the level of consuming alcohol when experiencing generalized anxiety, or even better, which is to fully give up drinking and cope with generalized anxiety through different aspects. Majority of the population experience generalized anxiety from past events or current events, but alcohol does not solve any issues in this society. It is the mindset you have and the steps you're willing to make the change to better yourself as an individual. And that was the end of my presentation. I hope you guys enjoyed. I hope you guys had listened and learned something. And to those of you guys that are graduating next Saturday, just like I am, congratulations, we finally made it.